Yo, what's up, people? It's your boy. I'm Chris the Dom One, and I am back with another video. Okay, Everyday Struggle is a show that premieres on Complex magazine, and they have a YouTube channel. And basically, in a nutshell, what this show is about is hosted by Joe Buttons and DJ Akademiks. They talk about things in hip hop news, hip hop culture, and the hip hop generation. All right. Now, there's a constant theme on every show, pretty much, that DJ Akademiks and Joe Buttons are at on a crossroad, and they're talking about basically people in the hip hop industry that's destroying the culture. Now, Joe Budden believes that it's labels like Capitol Records who pretty much root or is embedded in R&B more so than hip hop, and artists like Lil Yachty, they're pretty much ruining the hip hop culture by taking competition, the element of competition, away from hip hop culture, and it's weakening the movement and it's ruining hip hop in general. All right. Now, this is Joe Budden's opinion about this state. All right. Now, Lil Yachty was a guest, and this wasn't by accident. Lil Yachty wanted to appear on Everyday Struggle, basically to debate Joe Budden. All right. So for those out there that feel like this is something that wasn't organic, this was purely structured. They wanted Lil Yachty there. Lil Yachty wanted to be there. Okay. Basically, Joe Budden still displayed the same opinion that he has on every other show, talking about the hip hop culture and the hip hop movement, basically saying that hip hop artists have this kumbaya approach, and they're taking the element of competition out of hip hop, and it's ruining, and without competition, it's ruining hip hop, the hip hop movement and the hip hop culture. Now, there's one snippet in that particular show. Everybody just pretty much took and ran with it on social media. Now, before we talk about this, I have to say this for the record. I felt like when they was discussing about emotions and how a person should behave, to me, I felt like Joe Budden took it a little bit too far. All right. I know he was trying to make a point, but he just took it a little bit too far. And what I'm talking about is when he asked Lil Yachty in his mindset and his mood, Lil Yachty replied, "I'm good. I'm happy. I'm cool. I'm happy all the time." Now, Joe Budden took the happy all the time statement and ran with it to ridiculous land. All right. Now, for the record, when you watch that show in its entirety, you saw DJ Akademiks, you saw Joe Budden, as well as Lil Yachty, go through several emotions and several stages of emotions. That is called human behavior. There is no human being on the face of the earth that can be happy all the time. And there is no human being on the face of the earth that can be mad all the time, okay? You just saw it in that particular show. And if you dabble in society, if you go outside, you will see this constantly, all right? You see people at their brightest moments and at their darkest moments. You see people go up, you see people go down on their emotions. Sometimes people, that same individual that you saw 30 minutes ago that was smiling, laughing, and was in a good mood, later on that person may be in a terrible mood. They may be mad, they may be bitter, they may be in love. These are called emotions. None of us are robots and mannequins, all right? I thought Joe Budden overblown that statement and took it to ridiculous land. And there's a lot of people on social media that took it to ridiculous land too, all right? There was a couple of good jokes in there in social media. It was quite funny. But at the end of the day, I think everybody took that a little bit too far. Okay. Now, the one thing Joe Budden Lil Yachty, DJ Akademiks, the hip hop culture of today and the hip hop culture of yesterday. It seems like a lot of individuals seem to forget the evolution of hip hop. You know, hip hop started in the early 60s. A lot of people do not know that. That's when hip hop was embedded in the 60s. It was called doo-wop, okay? And in that particular time and in that particular era, you know, they were talking about what they were dealing with at that particular time, okay? You know, so they wasn't talking about Uzis. They wasn't talking about killing anybody. They wasn't talking about pulling out the Draco. Okay, they was not. There was no beefs in the 60s. All right, there. When you're talking about Joe Budden and his beef with a lot of artists, they wasn't doing that in the 60s. Now in the 70s and the 80s, hip hop got more cultural. I mean, it started embracing society, embracing the movement of that particular time. All right. A lot of people seem to forget in that particular era, it was very colorful. All right. Yes, you had different stages of hip hop. All right. You started seeing birth of different types of hip hop. West Coast, East Coast. All right. Were two of the major regions that distribute and created hip hop. Okay, I can never seem to forget the verse that Ice Cube said. The sun may set in the west, but it lands in the east. Basically saying just because hip hop, people think that hip hop was created in the west, it really originated in the east. Okay, but back to what I was saying, in the 70s and the 80s, it was a breakdancing culture, all right? It was a breakdancing movement. It was a very colorful movement, and you also had different elements and different stages of hip-hop in that particular era. You had classic beefs, okay? You had KRS-One and MC Shan, all right? You had Kumo D and LL Cool J. You had Kumo D, LL Cool J. Kumo D was the past of hip hop, and LL Cool J was the future of hip hop in that particular time frame. And you had those two brothers making diss tracks at one another. All right, it was more about the skill, the writing, the penmanship that they had in that time. It wasn't about killing somebody. It wasn't about talking about people's mamas, this, and people's kids, this, that, and the third. Okay, it was a very colorful movement then. All right, the 90s were pretty much similar to the 80s. It wasn't no real major beef, but there were three different points in that particular time that were misunderstandings, over ego, and trying to mass produce and take hip hop to another land. All right, now what am I saying? All right, basically what I'm talking about and what I'm referring to in the 90s, the Source Awards, when it was premiered in New York City. And when Snoop Dogg and Death Row got on stage, everybody from the East Coast booed them, all right? Snoop Dogg interpreted this as all of New York didn't appreciate West Coast rap. They was dissing West Coast rap. When in actuality, there were individuals at that particular audience that simply just don't like West Coast rap and didn't like those particular individuals. It wasn't the whole East Coast that was feeling this movement. It was clearly individuals that were spreading and feeding this movement. When Biggie beefed with Tupac, all right, Tupac hit Biggie with "Hit 'Em Up," all right, which is a classic diss track, and he said some certain things that in other diss tracks before "Hit 'Em Up," a lot of artists wasn't going to that, wasn't taking it to that level, all right? Basically, in a nutshell, Tupac talked about how he had sex with Biggie's wife, okay? And that beef really changed hip-hop and took it to a dark time. All right, people seem to forget we missed when Biggie died and when Tupac died. We missed a large portion of hip hop. If those brothers were still alive, hip hop would be as big as it is right now. It would be taken to another level. That's how much influence Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac had. They had artists that were under them that could have flourished and would have been more popular if those two individuals were still living today. All right. So it would have been very difficult, in my opinion. It would have been very difficult for the bubblegum movement to prevail. Okay. And when those two individuals died, God rest their souls, that's when you kept hearing all this bubblegum movement, the light hip hop. You kept hearing Will Smith had a couple of hits. All right. Anytime Will Smith can get some hits in that time when you had hardcore East Coast and West Coast rappers, in the mainstream on the radio, and Will Smith is on and popping, that should tell you something. When Biggie and Pac died, that left a huge space, a huge void that not only the artists that were under Biggie and Tupac couldn't rise from, but the movement just changed. It just changed back to the bubblegum hip hop. Okay, that's what I call it. It was more of a dance movement. A lot of hip hop artists was incorporating dancing in their acts and in their, we're not even gonna go into MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice. But it is what it is. They flourish in that particular time frame, even though MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice were current when those two individuals, Tupac and Biggie, was alive. Okay, so now you got this bubblegum movement pushing and moving. All right, yeah, Jay-Z filled some void. That was the introduction, and we all knew about Kanye in the early stages, but people felt like Ja Rule was the next person that they was going to place the crown on for hardcore hip hop. All right, and everybody was embracing this movement. Everybody was pushing the Ja Rule movement. Dr. Dre, Eminem, a lot of big names in that particular time was pushing the Ja Rule movement. All right. And this is where we come into the final stage of what I mentioned a couple of minutes back of ego. 50 Cent did not like this. He did not like the current stage of hip hop at that particular time because everybody was in a kumbaya moment. Everybody was on everybody's track. There was really no competition at that particular time. The same stuff that they're doing now, the stuff that Joe Budden do not like what they're doing now, they was doing that in the 90s, Joe Budden. You was there in the 90s, okay? What they're doing today, they did in the 90s. And 50 Cent did not like that look. 50 Cent started having issues and having gripes and beefs with several artists. And a lot of artists would just, let 50 Cent, crap on them, and they wouldn't say or do anything. And I think when it was Ja Rule was the biggest target. And the best thing Ja Rule could have done at that particular time was stick to the script. Basically just paid 50 Cent no mind. I felt like if Ja Rule would have just paid 50 Cent no mind, who knows how Ja Rule's career would have progressed after that. But when he started entertaining this and trying to have beef with 50 Cent and trying to make diss records, something that 50 Cent is great at. A lot of people undervalue 50 Cent. 50 Cent is a battle rapper at heart. Ja Rule was not, okay? And you can clearly tell on the diss tracks that Ja Rule made and 50 Cent made, and that ultimately destroyed Ja Rule's career, okay? And then now the land of hip hop, the scale of hip hop changed once again. It changed back to the dog eat dog a lot. The 50 Cent movement and artists that had that 50 Cent movement, that had the style of 50 Cent, the hardcore movement, it started getting its come up. But once again, hip hop changes again, just like seasons. And now it comes with, now we're at the point of, it's not about how hard you are or how skillful you are when you're talking about writing lyrics. It's not even about the delivery. It's about incorporating different aspects to your song. Yes, you can rap, you can rhyme, cadence. Your cadence can switch. You start adding you start singing. You add melodies, keynotes, things of that nature. You're adding so many things into your song, and this what spawned the birth of, even though Kanye is still in this particular generation, but he's not really the influence. The influence is people like Drake, that's pushing this movement. And now you got Lil Yachty, the Amigos. They're pushing this movement. It's not about how hard you look anymore. Back in the day, a rapper would come up will have an album cover with ripped t-shirts, ripped jeans, and the struggle look. I struggle to get to this point. All right, it's not that anymore. All right, now it's about the most expensive wardrobe you can find, the expensive shoes, embracing the fashion movement, embracing so many different types of elements that in early hip hop it was a no-show. You don't do that stuff. You do that stuff. It's about brokering deals. It's about embracing everything else that's around you and incorporating it into your songs, okay? And that's what Joe Budden is missing. He's missing the point. Hip hop has never always been one type of emotion. Hip hop has never always been one type of movement, one type of flavor, one type of flow. Hip hop has always been change. Hip hop has constantly changed from what it started in the 60s to what it is in 2017. And a lot of old heads like Joe Budden, the Get Off My Yard artists, and a lot of these older artists and some of the current artists that uses the older artist movement, they pretty much feel the same way as Joe Budden, because a lot of people don't see the undercurrent of this movement. A lot of these artists, a lot of these older artists, they can't eat no more, all right? Because they're not the current thing anymore, okay? So, of course, they're going to have this attitude of Lil Yachty, Lil Uzi, and mumble rap, and Drake, and, nothing resembles what the 90s was until Drake had that clap back on Meek Mills. That was the closest thing that you can say, yo, that reminded me of the 90s when Drake dissed Meek Mills, okay? And when The Game had his diss track to Meek Mills, that reminded me of the 90s, of the 80s somewhat, okay? But let's just face facts and face reality. That type of music isn't sellable to the market, all right? Not a lot of consumers want to buy that. That's not the type of emotion you can sell now. It's not about being pissed off at everybody. It's not about being the best MC, being on top of your game with your flow and your delivery and your cadence and the way how you write things. It's not about that anymore. It's about melodies, all right? A lot of people don't realize if you look at a lot of rap, a lot of hip hop songs, they don't have a lot of lyrics in it. You may hear maybe 20 words, less than 30. Then you hear a melody, and then you hear the break, and then you hear the intro of the break, and then they go back to another 20 bars, and that's it. All right. I mean, not 20 bars, but 20 words, and that's it. I mean, that's pretty much it. It's about music. It's not about being the hardest MC. It's not about being the hardest artist, the hardest rapper. It's not about being hard in general. Okay. It's about now making music. All right. Music that people can dance to in a lot of these clubs, a lot of these bars. That type of music is more appealing in that moment versus if you play like in the club was a very it was a very, very good but song that you can play in the club. Okay. But when you look at it, in today's clubs, in today's bars, a lot of people are not feeling that. They may, you just can't play another 50 Cent song, and a lot of people are going to be moved to it, all right? It's about commercializing your music, all right? And a 50 Cent song doesn't do that, all right? A Lil Yachty song does do that. It does commercialize. It does appeal to a lot of different types of consumers, a lot of different types of genders, a lot of different types of people in society in general. That's what it appeals to, all right? So, yeah, Joe Budden, I feel your pain, but this shall too pass, all right? What's popping now may not be popping 5 years from now. Okay, it may go back to the hardcore element. It may go back to the dog eat dog element. It may go back to I'm better than you element. All right, but right now it's just not at that movement. But Joe Budden seems to forget. A lot of older people that love and worship hip hop seems to forget. But hip hop always had different movements, different flavors, different phases. Okay. Now, as far as Lil Yachty go, as far as his music is okay. It's not the type of music I like listening to, but I can understand why a lot of people love his type of music and embrace his type of flavor, because that's the flavor, that's the catch of the day right now. Okay. And it may not be that way. And one thing about hip hop is you can't have the same mindset, and you can't have the same style. Eventually, you're going to have to change and adapt as the culture change and adapt. Okay. Lil Yachty is making the music that the culture likes now, but culture, their style and their taste changes by the days, by the months, and the year. And can Lil Yachty's stand the test of time? Time is kryptonite to hip hop artists. All right, you can be high on the mountain today, and you can be back on the gutters tomorrow. That's how hip hop changes. All right, hip hop doesn't change with the artist. Artists change with hip hop. Okay, so I thought a lot of people overblown Everyday Struggle episode, and a lot of people overblown, and you got to also blame Joe Budden on this standpoint. People wouldn't have overblown it if you didn't take it to that point of time, talking about, are you happy all the time? All right, I thought that was a ridiculous question. Okay. And it just didn't make no sense, and it really didn't fit into the discussion, and it made it made Joe Budden look petty. It just made him look petty. Lil Yachty handled it well, okay, but at the end of the day, the new school, the people that love the music today, and the people that love that was in love with music yesterday, a lot of people seem to forget hip hop changes throughout time. All right, it doesn't stay in the same format. That's why hip hop, when you're talking about hip hop culture, hip hop music in general, it fits the society better than any other style of music that is out there. All right, when you're talking about country, R&B, rock, pop, they try to fit into what is popping and what is going on today. And hip hop, it embraces it. It accepts what goes on today. It's not trying to fit in. It blends in, okay? But it is what it is. But guys, tell me what you think. Rate, comment, subscribe. It's your boy. I'm Chris the Dom One, and I am out.